Hello everyone, welcome to my next video in the series. My name's Devin Adams. I'm a Fortinet instructor in Tempe, and in our last video we looked at a FortiGate that has been taken over management to the FortiManager, and we imported in the policy and the objects there, and we saw how like the dynamic mapping works and how objects come in, so on and so forth. Really haven't seen much of the pie though, okay? So it'll all lead up to some magic here in a bit, I promise. All right. So, but our remote FortiGate over here is a blank slate. It's not in production yet. So we've brought it over. It's being managed from the FortiManager, but there isn't quite much else happening. So let's actually take this from scratch and see what we have to do to actually get this remote FortiGate managed and at least reaching out to the internet and maybe some policies and things like that. So, all right, so on our FortiManager and our device manager, we were successfully importing in the local FortiGate. And this right here just shows you the policy package that it is currently in synced with. Okay, now this guy has never had their policy packages brought in, and I promise you there's nothing on that FortiGate. So let's actually dig in here at a device level and take a look. Okay, so we have an IP address on the WAN interface on port 4. All right, the tunnel is up, and that's pretty much all we did with it. Okay, we changed the host name. All right, but not much. So let's go to router and let's go to static routes. So we did give it a default gateway because we needed to tell it how to get out to even get it to reach to the FortiManager and everything like that. But if we go to our interfaces, you'll see here that our interfaces aren't really doing much. So, hey, look at that. I didn't even realize. It looks like I did actually put in an IP address. Let's take a look at what's going on there. So, but if you guys notice here, port 1 has DHCP turned on. That's kind of weird. So, but that's the default setting. It's saying DHCP from like a internet service provider. So let's go ahead and make some changes here at a device level. So for starters, we're not using this interface. So I'm just going to say, you know what? Actually, I don't even need to touch that. I just want to make sure these management interfaces aren't left on. Last thing I need is someone coming by with the DHCP server and giving it an IP address. All right. Okay. Now let's go to port 4. And this is WAN interface facing. So we're just going to leave FortiManager access. I don't think I want anything else on my WAN interface management wise at this point. Okay. So, but what I am going to do though is that I'm going to give it an alias of WAN. All right. And then I didn't realize that I had already given this an IP address. I must have been playing around with it. But I'm going to give port 6 an alias of LAN. Okay. And then management side of things, well, there's not a FortiManager facing on the inside, so I don't need that. And you know what? No one in production should really be managing the FortiGate at all. But internally, you know what? I'll let it have ping access. So people can ping the default gateway from the local LAN side if they want to, all they want. That's fine. But I am going to turn on a DHCP server. So, and the reason why is because if I plug a machine on there, I want them to be able to get an IP address. So we'll just go ahead and pass out some IP addresses here. All right, we'll start with 20, 100 to 10.10.10.10.20. Let's see here, 150. I put in too many octets. There we go. So we'll give it a /24. So come on, 10 key. There we go. All right, default gateway. Yes, it's going to be the same. Sure. All right. That looks okay. All right, let's go ahead and hit OK. All right. So now we have our interfaces, okay? And we've given them aliases, but if you notice, there's no mapping here. So we have not mapped anything. All right, so, all right, I think that looks okay for right now. So these are the things that we need to do at a device level, right guys? So not a big deal. All right, so let's go ahead and what happens next? Now, if you're in my class, I turn to you guys and be like, why is it now modified? What's going on here? So in our last example, we mentioned how our device management database is completely independent from the actual settings that are on the FortiGate. So we just made a level change here, and we now have to push them down to the FortiGate. So how do we do that? We can select it, we can hit install config, we'll hit OK. Now I just did something that I don't recommend. If you install config, but I wanted to do it just to demo it, it skips the preview and it just pushes down the config. So it's saving a step in that sense, okay? But in reality, you'd probably want to take the time to preview it first and make sure that there wasn't any kind of weird errors that happened. But that is a way to do just a quick copy down the configuration file. Don't worry about previewing it. Just make sure the two are in sync with each other. Okay, so, and as you can see here, it's kind of thinking about it, and you can always come in here and see what it's doing next. All right, so it's working on it. All right. Sweet. Oh, good times. Oh, beautiful. All right, perfect. So once again, synchronized instead of modified. So the database that reflects, all right, our device level changes to the FortiGates, wrong picture by the way, right, are now the same. Should we test it out? Should we see if it actually did it? Well, sure. So I'm going to go to my GNS3, and I love GNS3 for testing things, right? And we're going to use one of these virtual computers. All right. So in theory, we should be able to do what? Get an IP address, right? Well, let's take a look. Because we're using DHCP. So here we go. DHCP. All right. Oh, look at that. Dora the Explorer. I'm going to get sued. Anyways, there you go. So our domain controller, our FortiGate is acting as a DHCP server. That's awesome. We should be able to ping the gateway, right guys? Because remember, we left ping access there, and that should be fine internally. Okay? But can we get out to the internet? Well, if I ping google.com, yeah, not so much. Okay? So, and the reason why is because we never wrote a firewall policy. We have no firewall policies. So that's what's going to happen next. Okay, so at this point, we had to do our device level changes individually to that remote FortiGate to at least push down some individual settings that's not relative to policy and objects. Now, let's go ahead and do our initial importing in our policy package. Okay, so let's go back to our FortiManager. And here I'm going to right click and say import policy. All right. Look at that. There is no policy to import. What is going on there? Guys, it's a blank slate. Yeah, it's a blank slate. It said, you know what? You're not using any firewall policies. Crazy, huh? So what happens now? What do we do now? Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, and when we get back, we are going to write a firewall policy for our remote FortiGate and then install it down to the remote FortiGate. All right, I'll see you guys soon.